Hi, I'm Alister Benn and welcome to Expressive Photography. You find me here on the north coast of Spain where I'm running some workshops with my really good buddy Adam Gibbs. And in today's video I want to talk to you about challenging conditions and how to make the most of your time in the landscape depending on what is thrown at you. Now this has been one of the most intense starts to a workshop I think I've ever run on the north coast here. We've had some unparalleled conditions with gale force winds, we had lightning and torrential downpours and then a huge amount of snow. It's the first time I've ever seen snow at sea level here on the north coast. Some of the conditions were so challenging it was almost impossible to shoot, but we were out anyway, and even with our phones and things like that we were able to capture incredible events such as giant blowholes where the sea is just erupting along the coastline, just awe-inspiring things. So I think it's very important for us to remember that the experience of being in the landscape is a really important thing for us to do, and the photographs are a byproduct of that. And we tend to find that the more engaged we are, the more excited we are, the more we're enjoying ourselves, the more opportunities present themselves also. So in this video, because I'm on the road, I'm going to go back and sit at the computer and we'll do a screen recording which will look at some of the photos I've made over the last few days, some of the video of the experiences that we've been having, and how to correlate those things to make the most of the next time that you're at the coast. So that's it for now. Let's dive into the office. So here we are back in the hotel, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to dive into my Lightroom catalogue and show you some of the photographs that we've been making. You may hear my voice from time to time cracking up. I've had a dreadful cold. Adam started with it not long after we arrived, and then I got it because we were sharing an apartment together. So I apologise in advance if my voice isn't 100%. So what do you do when the weather's terrible? Well, you can stay home and do something else, like watching YouTube videos or sorting out your album collection. Or you can head out into the landscape and have some pretty wild experiences. One of the things that was really important is when you're running a workshop, it's very easy to get out. You know, you've got a group of people with you who are motivated and keen to be out in the landscape. And even if the weather is suboptimal, there's still that desire to get out there. Now, we did have a few torrential downpours, and of course it was very difficult to be out all the time. But what we did do, and if we dive in quickly to this Lightroom collection that I've made, we headed down to the Guggenheim Museum in Bilbao, and this was the first day, and it was torrential rain. It was absolutely bouncing off the pavement, and we managed to find a little bridge that we could hide under and made lots and lots of photographs of this incredible architecture. The way the light was interacting with the surfaces was still really fascinating. In particular, there was this kind of glowing warmth coming from underneath the building there. You can see it again in this photograph. Some of these are unworked raw files, others have done a little bit of work to them. But I was very happy, and as was everybody else, to seek a little bit of shelter, get up underneath that bridge there and try and make some photographs even though it was torrential. And of course running into a coffee shop nearby to warm up with some pastries and lovely coffee. I did crop this one down to a vertical 16:9, which is a kind of an unusual aspect ratio for landscape photography. A very good friend of mine has been exploring Japanese aesthetics and using the 16:9 vertical to create some really, really interesting photographs. And this one I particularly like. I do love the way that the aspect ratio kind of forces you to read this up and down. You know, aspect ratios are really good at forcing us to read an image in a certain way. And of course, because I've been moving the camera around and rotating it, you can create some really interesting angles. Now, we did get out to the coast. This was I think this was perhaps the second day. We did get out, and very, very briefly it did stop, or in between some torrential downpours, it managed to kind of calm down for a little bit. One of the great things with seascape photography or any outside photography is if you can get the wind behind you, then at least you can photograph without your lens getting soaked. And thankfully, this is what we're doing here. And what I want to talk about in this image is the whole concept of shutter speed. When the landscape is, when the light is poor, and I'll use that word because it's what most people think of, grey, overcast light. When we think of, I don't think this is poor light at all. I think this is moody light. I think it's quite atmospheric light. But what I've tried to do here is put something in the foreground that's got tons of energy in it. So lots of angles, little sharp points here, and some lovely warm yellow coloured lichens. And what that does is it just lifts the image a little bit with some exciting geometry and some interesting colours. Now, this is a classic sort of, that's a 13-second exposure. And as you can see, the ocean is made to feel quite benign, really. It's quite a smooth surface. And we're using the geometry of the landscape to create most of the energy here. As I said, the foreground and then the angles of the rocks here, and of course this somewhat beautiful arch. So the colour palette of this is a little bit subdued. The energy is very much contained, because of the geometry that we're using here. Now, what I did was I felt that this was a little bit boring, a little bit lifeless. So I did make a second exposure, and this is just 1 second. And you can see here we've introduced quite a lot of dynamic water movement. Which I think complements the foreground rocks and the energy that's being brought by the landscape itself. Similar in feel, I think the first one feels more calm, it feels a little bit more, calm, atmospheric, I suppose. This second version is definitely more energetic, and you start to feel a little bit of that motion of the waves going on there. Part of the coast of Spain, or one of the pleasures I have about leading workshops to the coast of Spain, is that the geology from east to west is ever changing. This area of the coast is predominantly limestone. The whole place has been eroded by the power of the ocean over tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of years, and you get these kind of beautiful overhangs. The colour of the rocks themselves are full of peach and pinks and some really lovely tones, and they're very, very jagged, super sharp rock. If you rub against it, you'll rip yourself to pieces, or your waterproof pants or your Gore-Tex jacket. They're all very fragile. But what I love about this composition is this beautiful sort of geometry. I talked many times about the 5 triggers of luminosity, contrast, colour, atmosphere and geometry. And the geometry in this one is, I think, what really pulls it together, just this lovely sort of V-shapes and triangles and diagonals, which I think bring a lot of visual interest into the scene. Even though we have a very flat top of both of them and obviously a flat horizon, the top is very containing, the bottom is very energetic. Haven't really done anything to this one yet. I just like a lot of these files straight out of the camera. I think they're looking pretty good as they are. Just a quick note, I have announced a date for October, with a couple of spots left to come to this region of northern Spain. I'm running tours here on a regular basis. It's a workshop, it's not a tour. I do mostly teaching on these things, but we are going to some incredible places. So all of the photographs in this video and videos over the next couple of weeks are all taken on the locations that we'll be visiting on the October workshop. And of course, there will be some more dates coming in 2024. So if you want to join me on the north coast of Spain, click on the link below and show your interest for that. I want to talk here about composition to a certain extent. This is a very interesting area. It's quite a big bay with this really beautiful kind of incongruous sea stack at the back of it. And it's very easy to photograph the whole thing, but when you realise that you're doing that, it gets very confusing and very complex. And of course, this sea stack gets tiny in the distance. This is actually, well, it says 220 mil on my 80 to 400 because it's broken. So I don't exactly know the focal length of that, but I'm going to guess it's probably in the sort of 250 millimeter range. So what I've done here is I've allowed the C-stack to fall on that diagonal line. And what we can do with that is start to look at various aspect ratios and realize how they contain the scene. So this square I think works pretty well. We've got this lovely triangle coming in from the side, this diagonal leads up to here, and then this jagged horizontal is kind of an anchor, I think, on the right hand side. This is unprocessed, I haven't done anything to this at all, this is straight out the camera. If we look at the wider scene, we can see the impact of bringing in some weight on the right hand side of the composition. The left hand side has stayed more or less the same, but I've introduced the headlands on the right hand side. The wave energy, I think, in this photograph is a little bit more energetic than in this one here. And by showing this horizontal aspect ratio, and if I just turn the lights out there, in fact, what I will do is just make that full screen. This 16:9 aspect ratio, again, it forces us to travel to every part of the frame. We start in here, I think, and then we move across to that right-hand side quite naturally. But it seems to feel like we want to come back to that left-hand side, so it's almost like we're being drawn from one side to the other, back and forth and back and forth. And I love the feeling of harmony in this photograph. In the previous one, we are much more contained. This square aspect ratio is a really important one for just making things feel harmonious and contained. So certainly aspect ratio plays a huge role in our compositions, and when the light is somewhat flat or a little bit we haven't got sort of golden light or things like that, we have to understand the role of luminosity contrast, the subdued color palette, and the geometry of the aspect ratio, I think, is a massively important consideration for us. Now, I did mention that we spent some time on the coast here when these blowholes, we have these caves in the rock and the water gets forced in by big storm surges and erupts out of these things, and it is just awe-inspiring. We spent ages just walking around with our phones, taking little bits of video, just listening to the roar coming out of these holes. It was just insane. I don't believe the photographs really do the place justice. This was probably the best one I got, where a wave is just ploughing into the side of the cliff, which in itself is about 50 feet high, and then this is one of the blowholes erupting. I don't feel necessarily that the photograph really captures the energy that the video does, so hopefully you're going to enjoy some of these clips of us interacting with them and just them on their own right. this photograph here, another panoramic. This is 3.25 to 1, which is cinematic panoramic format. So this is if you went to an IMAX cinema. This is the aspect ratio you would be looking at. Again, I think the photograph is okay, but it doesn't capture, to my mind, the power and the rage and the sounds of being there at the time. And I think that's a very important thing for us to remember, that sometimes it's not always possible to make amazing photographs of amazing events. You know, sometimes the event is just bigger than the photograph will ever be. I think this is pleasant, but let's not forget that we can just go out into the landscape wearing full-on waterproof gear, getting soaked, and just feeling happy and joyful to be and experience these things. Adam Gibbs and myself both said that this is one of the most incredible experiences we've ever had. And I think, as you know, Adam and I have been around the world a few times and seen some pretty exciting things. I'm going to finish with a couple of intimate landscapes here. This was back at the beach where that arch was that we started the video with, and the way the water was interacting with the slopes, I think was really, really exciting. And I think I made two photographs here that I'm really rather keen on. I'll just make that full screen again. Understanding the shutter speed, I think, is really, really important. Timing the wave so that you're allowing the wave to rise to its maximum height, and then filming or photographing the descent of the wave usually creates the most interesting geometry. And this one we'll finish with, which is one of my personal favourites from the trip so far. I love the kind of incongruity of this little eye at the back of the scene there. Again, taken at the same beach as the arch. Tons of atmosphere, some beautiful colour and detail and texture in the rocks. This is a 16:9 aspect ratio. And I think it just goes to show that if the sky isn't cracking off to your satisfaction, that the colour isn't the way you liked it, or the clouds are not what you would want to be present in your photography. Look to the details, look to the small scenes, pull away from the sky, pull away from the bigger picture, grab your long lens and zoom in on bits of the world that are full of energy and are full of excitement. We had a whale of a time at this, and for many people these detailed type shots were the highlights of the trips because they're very personal. You know, it's the bit of the landscape that you find interesting, and you have a real opportunity to take something unique. I've never seen this photograph from this beach, and I've seen plenty of them over the years, so I feel quite excited that you can discover something new that perhaps others have missed or haven't really bothered to think about. This is the end of this week's video. Apologies for not getting videos out for the last couple of weeks. Obviously, with travelling and having the cold and being away, it's sometimes difficult to produce content. We're finally getting it together with myself and then Ann Kristin back in the house in Scotland by sending files over, and she's doing this amazing job of putting them all together. The book is coming very, very soon. It's going to be shipping, I would hope, in the next 6 weeks or 8 weeks or so. So the book is coming out of darkness. If you haven't got your copy yet, please click on the link and grab one. I will look forward to sending you that very, very shortly. And again, if you want to come to the north coast of Spain with me at any time, get in touch either through the registration form in the link below, or just send me a link or send me an email to say that you're interested in a North Spain trip, and we'll let you know when the next ones are going to be available. But for now, that's it. I'm going to get out there again and experience some more wonders of the north coast of Spain. But thanks for watching. Click the subscribe button and give me an old thumbs up. And thank you very much for watching. Bye for now.